So, this is part 2 of a 2-part series based on the 15 commitments of conscious leadership, which we did a class on a little bit earlier this year. And in case you weren't part of last week's talk, the consensus of the class was everybody needs to know this. Everybody needs to have this book and take this class, and this class needs to be 67 weeks long. And even then, we will still think it needs to be longer. Yes, classmates? Yes. So we decided to bring a couple of the aspects of this wonderful book and this wonderful class into the general congregation because everybody can really learn from this body of work. The book is called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, and it is just a delight. It offers us ways to be more fully integrated into who we really are, into our leadership life, our family life, our work life, our center life, wherever we are in the world, to be more conscious and more in alignment with our own truth. So today's message is called Standing in My Integrity, and it brings together a couple of the 15 commitments to create an opportunity for us to really understand our own definition of integrity and how to walk it out in the world. To kick us off, we like to check in with our annual theme, which is every path leads home. And so we like to check in with some different paths we might take into the center of our own beingness, which is represented by the heart, because every path will get us there, literally every path. And we get to decide which path we're working on at any given moment. So for this particular message, we're going to be touching into the path of self-acceptance, because we can't figure out what our values and integrity is if we don't really accept and know who we are. Into the path of connection, because this is a path that walks us in with other beloveds and other relationships, and also with the path of personal responsibility, because no matter how many times I've taken the class, can I do it for you? Nope. And can you do it for me? Nope. It has to happen on the inside of each one of us. Or I should say, it gets to happen on the inside of each one of us. And that is such a fun delight. Now, someone, I can sense it, the great Swami, Reverend Leslie, can sense that someone, maybe it's someone on the online campus, is thinking, I don't want to have to line up to your idea of what is moral and ethical, Reverend Leslie. It's none of your business. Oh my gosh, you're so right. Thank you for bringing it up. Otherwise, I might have forgotten to touch in on what definition of integrity we're using here when we're talking about standing in our integrity. And we turn to the words of our friends Jim Dethmer, Diana Chapman, and Ms. Klemp as they say this: integrity is not defined as conforming to a mental or ethical code, but rather as facilitating wholeness and congruence. So it's not about somebody else's idea. It's not about somebody else's morality. It's not about what the culture says or what your mom said or what your great-grandma twice removed said or what a minister says. I know, shocking. This may be the only time I tell you you don't have to listen to me. It's about what you think, what you believe, and connecting in with that. So in this definition we have, it's facilitating wholeness and congruence. So wholeness is a major word in the science of mind. If you haven't run across the word wholeness yet, I promise that you will, literally right now, because I'm going to talk about it. Wholeness is one of our foundational concepts, and it is the idea that every single being is made out of this energy that we call the divine. You might call it God, you might call it the one real perfection, the one infinite reality, the divine mind. I like sweet spirit because I think it sounds yummy. We're all made of that substance. Everything everywhere is made of it, and there's nothing else to be made of. That's a founding principle for us. And when we believe that, it's easy for us to know that each person, including ourselves, is whole, meaning nothing broken, nothing missing, nothing needing to be replaced. At our core, we have everything that we need to be happy, healthy, strong, powerful, integrated people. It's the natural truth of our being. It's wholeness. And congruence is walking that out in alignment with who we are. So that's the definition we're going to keep handy, that it is representing of the allness of who we are, every part of ourself included, and even the parts where we're like, I wouldn't mind, flicking that one little part of me off. No, all of us in our entirety, and knowing that nothing is missing and nothing is broken. Are we in alignment with that? Beautiful. So we're going to carry that into our message. This wonderful book gives us a few steps we can take, choices we can make that can help us to stand more fully in our own integrity. And the first one is to live in alignment. So take a moment and just absorb the idea that living in alignment is a choice. It's a choice of how we design our universe. So they defined this way. They said, alignment is knowing what we're up to in the world and being in complete devotion to it. It's knowing what we're about and then going just whole hog in that direction with the allness of our energy and holding nothing back. Now, super easy, right? There's this very quiet wave of the crowd going, no. like grass is blowing in the breeze. It can be really challenging. And part of it is this first point, that in order to live your life in alignment with your values, you have to know your values. You have to be willing to kind of unearth what makes you tick and what you think is important. And I would say a good 3-4 times a year, we have a talk that the whole point is, let's explore our personal values, because they're so different for each one of us. And that was part of why today's question was, what are you a stand for in your life today? That which you are willing to take a stand for, I'm willing to bet, is one of your guiding values. So for me, I can tell you authenticity is very high on my list. I can tell you that being creative is very high on my list, and I can tell you that integrity is very high on my list, because the feeling of being out of integrity is something that I have very little capacity to deal with. It feels yucky. I don't like it. When you know what your values are, I invite you to just take a little peek at it. Take a peek at those values and the rest of your life, all the things you do, and ask yourself, am I spending my time and my energy and my money in ways that reflect my values? Does my job reflect my values? Do my volunteer commitments reflect my values? Do my friend choices reflect my values? We're still breathing, right? Choosing to live a life of alignment means actively choosing to spend our time, energy, and money in alignment with our values. And it also means removing things that don't. Removing ways of spending time that perhaps don't align with our values. If, for example, someone is one who deeply values financial freedom, but is spending a lot of money on the Instagram shop, on yet another magic eyeliner or mascara. What is it with all the magic mascaras? They're so tempting at 2 in the morning when you're on social media. Just me? Am I outing myself? Yes, I am. Sometimes when we take a peek at those things, we see that there's something that we're doing in our life that is actively not in alignment with something that we say we value deeply. And then we're invited into this 2-part question. Is it that I don't actually value that, I just think I should? It's okay, we all do it sometimes. In which case, we lay that value down as a leading guide. Or is it that it's time for me to look at my choices? And that's okay too. We all do that too. But we need to know. We need to know what's going on with ourselves. Choosing what fits and what doesn't is not always easy, but it is the step that's necessary to create a life of alignment. I remember when I was just beginning to start ministerial school. And I was still working at the bead store as a creative director for a chain of small bead stores, making jewelry, and everything about that job was in alignment for me because I felt like it was my ministry to stand in a shop and have person after person who was afraid to be bad at something new, come in and be so nervous. And I'm probably going to be terrible at this, and I'm not creative, and I'm not artistic, and I don't know how to do any of these things, and watch them through the assistance of this team move into becoming someone who was confident with their choices and knew that they could do this and make beautiful things and share them with their friends and family. And I'm even emotional now. It's been years and years. This was my ministry. And then my job changed, as often happens. It's just me, only my job ever changed. Yep. And I was in the office all of the time, and I was doing work that probably I was better at in the terms of writing the books and creating the classes, creating the collateral, and I like doing all that stuff, but I didn't have that face time with people walking them through that process, and I realized this isn't in alignment with my highest values anymore because I'm not walking with people through their process. That's a piece I need to feel like this is my ministry. And not very long after that, you know what I did? I left that job and I moved into this one, or a form of this one. There's been like 9 forms of this job. It's okay. We stay, we just keep changing titles. That happens to all of us sometimes. Something that has been in perfect alignment shifts. And then it's up to us to decide, does this meet other values of mine, or is it time for me to shift as well? When we are living a life of alignment, it moves us into the opportunity to make another choice, which is to speak and act authentically. To speak and act authentically. Now, that's really easy too all the time, right? Nope, there goes the grass wave again. Not always. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it is not. When we are looking at whether we're speaking and acting authentically, I think it's really helpful to look at the word congruence, which was in our opening definition, wholeness and congruence. So congruence is really about matching your inner experience with your outer expression, matching who you believe you are with how you're showing up in the world through your speech, through your actions, through your presentation of life. Sometimes that can feel scary. Sometimes it can feel like, I don't know if my fully authentic self is welcome right here. Ever had that moment where you wonder? I invite you in those moments to take a little walk back to point 1 in this talk, to check in on whether that situation is in alignment with your guiding values. Because I would argue, as would the authors of this book, The 15 Commitments, that when we find ourselves afraid or nervous or unable to speak and act authentically, it is a really good indicator that we are not living in alignment, that we have found ourselves in a situation that does not welcome our congruence. So congruence is a word used a lot in the psychology field. It's a representation of wholeness of self from the psychological perspective, but I think it's also a really good representation of wholeness from a spiritual perspective too. When we know that everything about ourselves is the divine in form, in unique form, and when we're comfortable with that idea, it's easier to say and do the aligned thing that may feel challenging to the situation or the status quo. We think of all of our heroes, all of our cultural heroes stood up in the face of the status quo and spoke their truth and acted their truth and caused a change to happen. That's how they become our heroes. Nice ladies who sit in the 3rd row and say nothing forever. I'm sure you're all lovely, and I'm sure you're going to talk after service. You know, the well-behaved women rarely make history story. It's true. Well-behaved men as well. We rarely make history. What makes history is the willingness to say, I see it differently, and this is why, and I'm going to be loved all the way through this process until people start agreeing with me and the world changes. What a beautiful way to show up. We can't do it if we're not willing to connect with how we feel and think, though. We're so good at connecting with what we think. As a culture, as a Science of Mind congregation, we like our brains, don't we? We're a very intelligent and educated congregation. It goes with the package. And sometimes we need to kind of turn the thinker off and turn the feeler on. Being willing to think, to act and speak authentically requires being willing to feel feelings that are not comfortable. Unless you have so perfected your universe that every single thing that ever comes into your mind is going to be met with open arms and rainbows and glitter, which if you have, please teach me. But most of us are working on it. And if there are bumpy spots in our universe, which almost inherently there are, being willing to sit in that discomfort long enough to figure out what is yours to say, what is mine to think, what is mine to do in the world to shift it, that is what moves us forward. We have to be willing to sit in the discomfort temporarily while it shifts. And what shifts it? Our willingness to speak and act authentically. It can be a little nerve-wracking because we don't always know how it's going to be received. But one of our great gurus, one of our favorite people, likes to remind us often and loudly that clear is kind. Clear is kind. I cannot tell you how many times I have said it. I cannot tell you how many times it has been said to me. Speaking and acting authentically, clearly, honestly, from a place of centered truth is always kind, even if they don't like it. Take a breath. Clear is always kind, even if they don't like it. Because what we're doing is we're giving them a strong foundation to stand on, those who we're sharing with, the foundation of our truth, from which they can find their truth. And they may or may not ever come to agree with whatever clear thing we have shared with them. But that's not really the point. The point is authenticity meeting authenticity. The point is divinity meeting divinity on the field of integrity. From that place, we can disagree with every single point and still meet in love. Oh, isn't that the goal? Isn't that the idea? That no matter what is happening, we can show up in love. And from that place of truth, we are so comfortable that we can, that we will show up in love. So once we are in alignment, we're speaking and acting with authenticity, then we get to make a third choice, and that is to keep impeccable agreements. Boy, there's a lot stacked into those three words. To keep impeccable agreements. Let's go back, let's do it backwards. Agreements. Things that we say we're going to do. Things that we say we're going to do. It's important that we make clear agreements, that we actually know what agreement we made, and not to call y'all out or myself, but here, I'm going to call us out. So sorry. You know that thing that we do where we have somebody say, hey, can you do this someday, whenever, when you get to it, at your convenience? And you're like, oh, well, sure, I'll see if that is a thing that works. I don't know. That, we got to knock that off. That's a no pretending to be a yes, isn't it? When we're I'll see if I can, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. I would love to, but I don't have the time. You know who might be able to help you with that? Person X. When we do the fuzzy, vague, my dad calls it mush mouth, the mush mouth agreements, we're not saying yes, we're saying no. Is that speaking with authenticity? No. Is it standing in our power? Absolutely not. Oh, all right, shake it off. Sorry, got to get one good call out each service. If it makes you feel any better, I'm usually calling myself out, so fair enough, fair enough. We want to release those vague ideas of, kinda, because we're not making a clear agreement. Then nobody ends up feeling satisfied. You didn't really come through, they can't really count on you, but nobody can really point out how or why, and it's never addressed because there was no clear agreement that got broken. We gotta know who, how, when, like what are we agreeing to? Let's have a real conversation about that. It is up in the office. We're consistently really trying to make super clear agreements. But do not, my friends, do not say yes if you mean no. Keep our agreements. That which we have committed to consciously, which that's what stopping that whole vague fuzzy thing is it causes us to slow down and stop and actually think, do I agree to this? Is this a thing I will do? Is this a thing I want to do? Is this a thing I'm gonna do? Is this a thing I'm gonna do with my whole heart and all my energy? And if it's a yes, then we keep those agreements. We keep them. We do what we said we would do. What was that congruence again? Showing up on the outside the way we show up on the inside? Keeping an agreement is an example of that. I think that I'm a person who will do this thing, therefore I do the thing. I was talking with my daughter the other day, and she was talking about a situation she's been in recently where some people in her life were doing things that were less aligned with her values than she's comfortable with. And in some situations she reacted one way, and in other situations she reacted another way, and she was just kind of filling me in and doing the, how would you handle this, Mom, kind of conversation. And as we got going in this conversation, it became very clear that she knew her answer, as we all do, because we're all made of the divine. She knew her answer because she could tell me the situations in which she felt, in her words, yucky. It just kind of felt yucky walking away from that situation. And I felt better in the times I handled it like this. Now, my daughter is not a science of mind person. She says she's an atheist. She's the most science of mind atheist I've ever met because it rubs off on people whether they know it or not. And she would never come to me and say, what does science of mind have to say about this? But sure enough, when you start talking it through, she's able to tell me, well, you know, it's important to me that people respect this kind of relationship or this kind of behavior. She was able to tell me what her values were and why she didn't feel comfortable. And then she sat for a little while and she said, you're going to tell me I have to change it, aren't you? No, you just told you have to change it. Cheers. The final step when we're thinking about these agreements is every once in a while you'll show up in a situation where you have every intention of doing the thing. And then you get into it and the thing is not possible for some reason. It's going to take longer than you thought. It requires a different tool than you have. It turns out you don't actually know how to do it. There's all kinds of things that can get in the way. Does that mean that you have just broken your integrity and there's no hope for you? No, there's this wonderful step called renegotiating your agreements, where you go back to the person with whom you made the agreement and you say, hey, I get that I agreed to this, and for reason X, I am unable to do it. Can we renegotiate how to make sure you get what you need in a way that is actually doable? It can look like a different timeline. It can look like passing it to someone else. It can look like acquiring a tool or an object or a technique that you don't have already. But the idea is we don't just ghost. Y'all know about ghosting? Where you just kind of disappear and don't answer anymore? Instead, we dig in. We dig into the situation. How can we make this right? Let's make this right together. When we show up that way in relationship, authentically, keeping our agreements, and doing the work when something goes awry so that we can bring it back into integrity, there is this peacefulness that exists on the inside of ourselves as well as in our relationships that allow us to be our most powerful self, that allow us to walk out on the inside in a visible way what the invisibility of that presence of wholeness is on the inside of us. This truly is showing up as God intended, as Spirit has created us to be. It is the place of happiness, of peacefulness, of joy. In Think Your Troubles Away, Ernest Holmes said it like this: real happiness is built upon integrity. It is the happiness of the soul itself, and it is the only kind of permanency there is. Real happiness is built upon integrity, and integrity is built into how you were made. So this week, our invitation is to really look at where we're at in our walk with integrity, to really take some time to feel into how in alignment we are, how easily and often we're speaking and acting in integrity, and how well we're doing with keeping our clear, honest agreements. Because that sense of walking in integrity and living in happiness, you are worth that. You are worth living that life. And so it is. Let us take this into prayer as we just turn our attention to the knowingness that there is one power, one presence, one life. We call it by infinite names and no name at all. It is this effervescent, conscious energy that is the very truth upon which we all stand. And it is all good, all love, all peace, all truth, all beauty. And it is right where we each are. It is in the very center of our own beingness. As every path leads home, it is the home at the center of our own hearts. Different for each one of us because we are all unique, and yet it is all one, all whole, all perfect. And so what I know is that each one within the sound of my voice is being met in that place of inner wholeness with whatever is on our hearts and our minds, that it is being met with the yes, my dear, yes, divine one, healing energy. That anything that no longer serves is falling away with ease and grace, and that we are each one being invited in beautifully and lovingly into a more expansive, more integrated, more loving expression of ourself in complete authenticity, because that love is the pure truth of who we are. So grateful I am to know that this good is unfolding for and as each one of us, as I just let it be and trust that it is beautifully handled by the infinite universe. We say together, and so it is.